I really didn't want to make this review, but the movie G20 is so bad that it just cannot be ignored. I usually try and take the journalistic approach of getting the drop on movies that are coming out in theaters, but the only movie that came out this week in theaters was Sinners, and I don't really have much to say about it. I'm just going to briefly talk about it at the end of the video, so today we're just going to do G20. Amazon is really testing the limits of how far they can push the woke shit, but I'm not too worried about it right now because all these like political propaganda movies and TV shows that Amazon is pushing out, it just looks terrible and it's just cringy and funny at this point. They just make themselves look like idiots. I will be talking spoilers, so if you want my final verdict spoiler free, skip to this time in the video. Viola Davis is a good actress, but this was just embarrassing. She plays a combat veteran who got famous from a photo op, and apparently that makes her qualified to be president. Amazon really ventures out with this idea. They make her the first black female president, and she has the strength and skill to take out 200-pound dudes at the age of 60. It's going to be really interesting to see in the next year all of the media that comes out wrongly predicting Kamala Harris's victory, or at least Donald Trump's loss in the 2024 election. We saw it with Mickey 17, and this movie makes it number 2. While at the G20 summit, the mercenary group hired to provide security betrays all the world leaders. I was absolutely shocked when this happened. I couldn't believe it. In all seriousness, this is like the beginning of the very desperate mental gymnastics trying to justify this premise. There was like 2 moments at the beginning of the movie where immediate red flags were raised about this PAC's security group, but no one does anything. The leader of this terrorist attack is played by Anthony Starr, and he's basically just a diluted, more cheesy version of Homelander from The Boys. I mean, he was actually intimidating in like season 1 and maybe season 2 of The Boys, but in this movie, he's just pure cheese. And it's not his fault either. It's pretty obvious that the director is the one dishonoring their family name with this movie. I refuse to believe that Viola Davis and Anthony Starr were doing their thing in this movie. So, Hollywood, if you're looking for directors, look elsewhere. In the immediate wake of the attack, the president, the head of her security detail, whose name is Manny, some random economic lady who's apparently important, but she has no implication in the plot, the second lady of South Korea, and the British Prime Minister, who's a bumbling idiot, by the way. He's the typical misogynist who's just there to make the women look good. They all manage to escape, but they're still trapped in the venue. They're basically just like the stereotypical horror film group of people where you have like the 1 or 2 main characters who are like the leaders of the group. Then you have like the one jerk who like opposes everyone. And then you have like a couple of other characters that are more quiet but are just there to prop up the main characters. The president's family is also running around trying to escape. I'm glad that they at least didn't emasculate the first gentleman, but on the other hand, you have her daughter who's like this bratty little shit who is super entitled, but at the same time, she's a prodigy who can outsmart the Secret Service at the White House. This whole family survival trope in Hollywood is just getting super annoying at this point. And then there's her son who's just useless. He doesn't really do that much at all. The attackers want to expose the wealthiest nations for exploiting the resources of weaker nations, but how are they going to do this? Through AI deepfakes. Don't you just have the fullest faith in the writers at Amazon? The rest of the movie is just all the black people, or at least all the non-white people, just beating up and humiliating all the white people. You get the beefed up, bald-headed white dudes with tattoos all over. Of course, you can't pass that up. And Cheesy Homelander's character is weird because he acts like a far-right extremist, which obviously the left thinks is so abundant these days, but while his objectives can arguably be applied from a conservative viewpoint, the talking points that he pushes sound way more like a left-wing socialist, like warmongering or stuffing billionaires' pockets or governments exploiting weaker nations. President Sutton's policies are stupid too. She wants to address world hunger through cryptocurrency, and the logic behind it is like, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for life. This doesn't really make sense because, first of all, resources in sub-Saharan Africa are scarce at best. Secondly, you're still investing money, or fish in this case, in another country, and you're also investing away from your own currency. One of the most idiotic parts of the movie is when a reporter asks the president about the proper usage of tax dollars in her plan to address world hunger, and her husband just shoots the reporter down by saying, "You're hijacking my date." But don't worry, the left definitely understands the importance of unconditional free speech. A few people in the president's inner circle are in on the conspiracy, and something you'll notice throughout the movie is that a lot of the plot points are based on the most common socio-political trends like AI or cryptocurrency or foreign aid, just to name a few. And one of the reasons why some of these people are turning against her is because she, quote, betrayed her country when she decided that other nations are more important than America. Now, while I think betrayed is a strong word and I don't advocate for treason, I'm about to lay down a hard truth on you. It turns out that just because your own nation is better off than others, it doesn't mean we should subsidize the development of those other nations. The whole point of a sovereign nation is that you have your own people and values to protect, so to make it seem like the America First ideology is invalid is just a misread of how the world works. But these liberal subs insist over and over that, no, we're all equal and we all want the same thing at the end of the day. We should be helping each other and understanding each other. Anyways, G20 makes the rookie mistake that all these political propaganda movies make, which is that the protagonist has no character flaws at all. They need to facilitate the message that the writers are pushing, so if they have any flaws, it compromises their credibility and thus the integrity of their message. The only character flaw she has is that she has to face a lot of criticism, because naturally presidents never have to face criticism. It's just her, so it's not actually a character flaw. The only other character flaw she has is that she feels like a failed mother because her daughter hates her, and while they resolve this at the end, they don't do it properly, so that doesn't count either. Other than that, she's the ideal woman. She's capable, competent, strong. There's a scene where she's training hand-to-hand combat with the head of her security detail on the White House lawn, and she actually beats him. A female combat veteran who's definitely not in the best shape of her life and is certainly no spring chicken is able to take down the most elite agent in the entire United States Secret Service, but definitely not propaganda. There's a lot of her trying to be the leader over Manny, even though it's his job to protect her with his life, but she always insists that they fight together. There's a part where Manny says no to them taking a detour to save these other people, and she just says, as president, I don't need your permission, which is a very common misconception about the Secret Service. They absolutely have the authority to physically prevent the president from doing something to put themselves in harm's way. Of course they kill him off because, God forbid, any other person hog all the screen time or action from this woman. She does everything right. She always makes the morally correct decision, which, I'm sorry, but that's just so boring. It wasn't as boring as, like, Brave New World, but it was still so boring. Speaking of Marvel movies, the climax of this movie is more ambitious than a Marvel Studios climax. Cheesy Homelander dies and it just ends right then and there. I obviously hated it, but at least the propaganda wasn't as dangerous or as reckless as other movies have done. This time it was just pure comedy. I could go on all day about the specific instances of propaganda in this movie, but just to name a couple, there was one scene where she says, I had to work twice as hard to become president. I'm sorry, honey. No, you didn't. Half of this country has been demanding a black female president for years now, so spare me. There's a conversation between the president and this other woman, and one of them says, 100 years ago, you and I didn't have the right to vote, which, first of all, stop wording that like you were around during women's suffrage. We all know you weren't around during the women's suffrage. Secondly, this is only half true. Women gained the right to vote in 1920. So I think depending on whatever state they would have lived in, they would be able to vote 100 years ago. But third, none of this really matters because guess what? 300 years ago, none of us had the right to vote, but you don't see me dwelling on that shit. The sad thing about this movie is that despite its infection of cringe, it takes itself totally seriously. The studio really watched this and was like, that was so good. This is definitely something we can release to the masses. It's so funny too because they never say what political party the president belongs to, as if the position the studio is taking is supposed to be neutral, even though this is some of the most transparent propaganda I've ever seen. If you're gonna throw up on stage in front of everyone, don't turn around to do it. We can all see you anyways. Just stand there and just throw up everywhere. If you're going to Burger King and you're going to get 5 Whoppers and 5 more Whoppers, then why are you getting a Diet Coke? For my final verdict, I'll be ruling against G20 at 22%. It was just a blatant ripoff of Olympus Has Fallen, but with infinitely more political commentary. I guess I'll just leave you guys with a question. How much are you willing to accept? Because the wokeness epidemic in Hollywood is not about how far studios are willing to push this. It's about how much audiences are willing to accept. So how much are you willing to accept? I truly want with all my heart to believe that wokeness is actually dying off in Hollywood, but this movie is ranked #1 on Prime Video in the US. Just don't watch it. Stop eating this slop. It's only further enabling it. I'll just give my very brief thoughts on the movie Sinners. It's a vampire movie that takes place in a black town in Jim Crow, Mississippi, 1932, and it actually is pretty interesting, but wait. It's written and directed by Ryan Coogler. I liked Black Panther, but then I let my fucking brain develop, and then I realized just how much subtle propaganda was in that movie. Sinners is probably the most on-the-nose allegory for race relations that's hiding behind the mask of historical accuracy. It was actually pretty bearable for most of the movie, but of course Ryan Coogler had to get greedy, and at the end he had Michael B. Jordan single-handedly take out like 30 white people. Rotten Tomatoes critics naturally having the most integrity and definitely not spreading their cheeks for the Black Lives Matter regime, and all the self-hating white people just jizz their pants. This review was definitely very fun to make, so if you enjoyed it, please consider dropping a like and hitting subscribe, but that's all for this case. This court is adjourned.